Vaughn is not your mic is
Okay, so going back to topic, then the Ukrainian threshold is to a large extent defined by the economic dimension. If the Ukraine is not supported by EU and the US, and that becomes perhaps then the more relevant question, not necessarily casualties, but how long would the West in general, and I guess we should perhaps be specific. How long would Europe? Because Europe, I don't think can do that for so long. The US can, in many ways do it sort of infinitely, but with repercussions increasingly, so of course not infinitely. I mean, again, look at Afghanistan, and every single war the US get involved in, they tend to just get like more and more costly because, the more money they can funnel through from taxpayers, the more someone gets. So like, what is the threshold for Ukraine? Like how, because I think that kind of becomes more relevant. When do you kind of get this insurgency that Toby kind of referred to? When do you start to get that kind of twisted all the way around? We're like, no way, we're not fighting anymore, because that happened to France. There they had to actually stop doing offensives. They still had their soldiers, they still had conscriptions, but there were such massive resistance from their own troops to go on further offensive, and also at home, because they got so many body bags coming back, right? And so at some point they said like, no, we're not doing any more offensives. And I would assume that is a logical iteration of this war at some point for Ukraine, where the resistance from the general population is going to be like, no more offensives. You can have we are going to defend. We're going to try to do our best, but like this like senseless slaughter, it's.
We are already seeing certain signs of like there are certain units like in Bakhmut or in the Kharkiv Luhansk border region where some troops don't want to go ahead. Even the neo-Nazis or some of the mercenaries they don't want to push because they feel that they are getting sent on an offensive without sufficient support. That is already happening. So it's just that why I say the certain numbers is that in the case where the West would support indefinitely, how many troops Ukraine will have to die before they have to they will not be able to carry on anymore. I would say now let's say Ursula's number is correct, 100,000. I would say that maybe another 400,000 up to 500,000 troops dying. I think that would be the breaking point. I think Ukraine will not be able to carry on the war.
100,000 is a conservative estimate because there are already confirmed 100,000 obituaries in relation to this war.
So because if let's say 500,000 troops is dead, that will also mean 2 million casualties because there will be another 1.5 million that will be maimed and totally injured and out of action. 2 million guys out is, I think Ukraine is
for a country of 28 million. Then
I don't think you can carry on the war anymore. But that's my opinion. That's my opinion. In the case where USA or NATO will just carry on and go through with the pain and just continue to support the war, I think that's the threshold. Beyond that, I think Ukrainian people will just overthrow the government. That's how I feel. Because the SBU will be sent to war. Even the SBU people, they are enjoying life now. They'll be sent to war because you just cannot allow to have all these well-able people to walk around.
Do you think that if the people overthrow the government,
German was sending old men and little boys by the end?
Well, yeah, no, it's dependent on the psychology of the country. Are they willing to actually fight until the last person? If you
the Germans were able to coerce the senior citizens, and this is not an unusual thing to be happening in war in like desperate situations, but like it was to a higher degree in Nazi Germany, especially if we're thinking about like around Berlin and so forth. They used a lot of penal battalions where they had not just forced conscripts, but people they wanted just like they used people as minesweepers, right? Like it's but the thing with the Ukraine, getting in this the way the Germans did it, it was kind of like here you have a rifle because you have probably some hunting experience. Most people your age do. Here, fuck off, go and kill them, and then they die. Sorry for the language, by the way. The Ukrainians may be able to mobilize to some extent like that, but I find it hard to believe that they will be able to. I don't kind of see that they're so dictatorially bound, like so totalitarianly bound in such a grip that like Nazi Germany was, because it was after all like a fairly peculiar case of refusing any form of capitulation and so forth. Sorry, Vaughn. Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, like I said earlier, how much equipment are they hiding in Western Ukraine? How many soldiers are hiding in Western Ukraine, under the guise of being in territorial? I mean, how many well-equipped, able-bodied men are hiding in Ukraine because they don't want to go east? I mean, even the Germans knew going to the east during World War II was a death sentence, and they were well-equipped and trained at the time.
Well, okay. Well, here's another question. How many soldiers do you think are currently in the Ukrainian armed forces, including foreign everybody? How many? What do you think the general total is, or at least
A million at least.
about a million?
Without the death toll, I'd say at least 700,000, maybe.
Okay, so let's
take
fall
the
right in
dead
the
out,
middle.
maybe 500 left.
Yeah, let's fall right in the middle and say like 800, right? Let's say there's about 800,000 personnel in the Ukrainian armed forces from every branch, from every side. How many of those are actually combat effective personnel? How many of those personnel do you need to have manning every single checkpoint in Ukraine? How many of the personnel do you need to have manning the border with Belarus and Russia? How many of those soldiers can you actually use in combat before the rest of the security around your country breaks down?
How many do you need against Poland?
So let's say I say 500,000 would be of these 700 to 800,000. Maybe 500,000 really can fight. Like they went to the West to train. They might be pre-war soldiers. So maybe half 500,000, which is why I say, if 500,000 troops die, they are effectively gone. That means every single soldiers that is upcoming, they are just new soldiers. There is no more experienced soldier left.
Yeah.
This is why that there will be the collapse, because you cannot operate with totally no veterans, no sergeants, no staff sergeants. It's not possible to fight the war. But to get there, that will be another half a year to 1 year of combat.
Well, if it starts to break down, right, what do you think Azov will do to the Ukrainian government? Because Azov does have a significant hand inside of the Ukrainian.
I think
I'm pretty sure the US would drop off Azov to be able to actually coerce and take over the government, because they have been arming them already, right? So why not? They arm Azov, and or not necessarily Azov specifically, but it will be some of those closely affiliated. They will have them be able to maintain a military grip, because Americans like doing that often. So they will do that to Ukraine as well, because why, of course.
But it will be hard, I feel, because if they want to take over, half a year ago, they still have somewhat the power. Now it's already starting to get a bit challenging. If you say they're going to lose another 200,000 troops up on top of the 100,000 troops now, I'm not even sure if they dare to take over the government, because
there might be. These are probably quite shrewd people, so we shouldn't be too surprised if they were to be taking all these fresh conscripts and so forth. That the casualties are minimized, relatively speaking, on their political those who are politically loyal to take over the state in that way, right? So that's why I'm not like.
The problem is you cannot send them to the front. For example, we have seen some footages of the right wingers or the Azov or neo-Nazis. They march some of the soldiers off for execution. I think there's one footage coming out from the production side, the drone footage, where they discover these Ukrainian troops marching into some forest, but then they are actually there to execute these people. But there will be one point where these soldiers with rifles themselves will start to shoot all these neo-Nazis. There will be a point where they will have to stop these guys. They are not going to listen to them.
Well, you're assuming two things can't happen at the exact same time. What if while the massive casualties are being accrued, then Azov makes a push for government?
Yeah, because that's what I meant. That they would influence enough, perhaps, to actually send the would-be dissidents, the would-be defeatists, as they would like to call it. They might be able to influence the army enough to actually get as many of those to be the casualties. So they, relatively speaking, might still, like, if there is a mutiny, they might still be able to coerce them further, especially if they then get a specific backing from the U.S. instead, and then suddenly the Ukrainian army becomes the rebels, they will probably find a way to spin it. I'm not sure, but I kind of see that one as a kind of lot more likely, considering like if you see how entrenched they have become over this since they got in there, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to actually shift those casualty rates.
Toby,
Sorry?
we can't understand what you're saying because it's kind of like talking over everybody.
Well, like this idea that there's going to be a local indigenous uprising. Ukraine is completely dependent on NATO aid for diesel.
I totally agree.
Food, ammunition. So I don't see it. Like, there's probably already been attempts at uprisings in Ukraine. The whole thing is one big uprising when you think about it. But how would we even know? It's not like they have a free media. When the Ukrainians went into Kherson, the only people there were the ones that didn't take the Russian advice and leave. What did the Ukrainians do? The first thing they did was they went around looking for dissidents, looking for people to pick on. Why? Because they're frustrated, because they're angry, but they're not exactly out winning hearts and minds. So for all we know, I can't imagine what you would do. You just get out of the country, and that's what everybody's been doing. They've been getting out of the country. Like, I think Ukraine might be largely empty. I'd be interested to know the reality about how many refugees have left the country and how many people are actually there.
And the thing that's motivating most Ukrainian soldiers is the pay, because Ukraine is an extremely poor country.
Horrible.
So a lot of these rural guys, they're just looking for a job. I mean, that's the primary motivation. It's not some kind of like deep-seated nationalistic yearning or some kind of yearning for a liberal democracy. It's more like they're trying to put food on, trying to eat, basically. And then the military comes and gives them jobs, which is usually better than the shit they're usually doing. A lot of these guys have a criminal history, too. So
I think a lot of the guys in those nationalist battalions, when things really start going bad, I think a lot of them are going to be just like World War II German Nazis and party members just trying to get out of the country and hide, because they're going to be blamed for stuff by their own people. People are going to be mad about it. I mean, we already know they're blocking and doing penal executions to keep units from – I mean, there's just a lot of reasons where the general population would turn against them too. So I think, they'll just run and hide. They'll get the hell out of there.
Those senior official Nazis are leaving the country while they got like their 14-year-old girls and old people fighting their war for them.
Yeah,
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, they've got to see the writing on the wall. They know better than what we know that's going on. I mean, think about it. There's guys in the Azov that know exactly how many motherfuckers are dead, and they know what's really going on in Bakhmut or Soledar or wherever.
Azov has been killing their own people for since the beginning. They've been
getting the hell out of there.
In Mariupol, they already been killing their own soldiers for mutiny or perceived mutinies.
Yeah, they were killing them when they tried to surrender at Avastal and stuff.
They were already doing that bullshit. Like even in Donetsk.
Well, that's kind of why I bring this up, right? The intensity in which Azov fights in this conflict is, it doesn't look like it's been dying down, right? You look back at Azovstal, they surrendered, but look how long they held out. And sure, we can attribute some of that because they were told to not surrender. But I mean, they still fought back. They would shoot their guns back at the Russians. You see the Azov soldiers fighting across, and I'm talking about the lower ranking Nazi officials. I mean, the upper, Yvonne and Greg, you both had it absolutely correct. Toby as well. The upper senior guys, they're gone. They're probably not even in the country anymore. But what are we going to see as the war goes on? If Russia goes on this offensive and maybe breaks through one line, right, and starts to pour through, are we going to see mass just rearranging of the Ukrainian armed forces?
Well, we've already seen Polish policemen go into the West. I mean, Zelensky actually passed laws to allow Polish police officers to do police administration duties in the West. So, and you've got so many American mercenaries, so many Western troops, Polish troops in there already. What if you end up with a situation where no native-born Ukrainian wants the war to continue, but they don't matter anymore because it's basically like this depopulated land staffed with NATO employees?
Yeah. And plus, a lot of these NATO or Azov guys are like straight-up criminals. They're already rejected by their society. They have nowhere, they have no other alternatives. It's either war and die, and that's it. And they voice that. They voice that on everyone else, even though that's not in their particular best interests.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the question. I appreciate the answers. I mean, we're looking if Russia does go on this offensive, is Ukraine just not going to function anymore as a military unit?
Well, I'm not even sure there is a Ukraine. It's just like at this
Okay.
stage,
No,
without NATO
well,
weapons, without NATO
no,
people,
no.
without NATO policemen, without
Toby.
NATO diesel, there is no Ukraine.
Toby, I totally agree.
The question is, what is Poland going to do?
Agree. I guess the question would be better: what will those armed forces inside of that nation, that whatever you want to call it, what's going to happen if Russia goes on this offensive? Right. We can talk about Russia has all these soldiers and all this equipment ready to go. We have to ask, well, what are the defending forces ready for? Are they ready for?
Well, they're probably going to. They probably want Russia to go on the offensive, and then they'll broker a peace, and they'll take the bits of Lvov and the rest of it that they claim as their ancestral homelands. All of the aristocrats in the EU will get their traditional land holdings back. Russia will get given this broken, burnt-out country that they can reconstruct, and they can have whatever is left of the Azov militants, and everyone will go home happy.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was the whole point at the start of the war. I mean, nobody actually expected Ukraine to beat Moscow and march into Moscow. Nobody. If you have a look at like what NATO's been saying Russia has got to do, it's absurd. It's stupid. They've got to completely surrender. They've got to give up their nukes. They've got to abandon Putin. You know, he's got to resign. They've got to like mea culpa. It's absolutely absurd.
They're
so nobody
breaking apart Russia as a country.
Yeah. Nobody is making serious suggestions, which tells you something. It tells you that they don't expect Ukraine to win. This whole thing from the very beginning just stinks of an exercise to break up Ukraine.
Yeah.
From both sides. Sides.
It reminds me of Yugoslavia in some way. And then the final end point of Ukraine could be they become a small Ukraine like Serbia. You know, like Serbia they'll be landlocked, and then they'll be like trapped, and then very hard geopolitical situation for them to deal with. The sort of situation where Serbia is like being surrounded in a way by the former Yugoslav states, and then they have all their hands tied geopolitically. You know, they can't do much things, and then landlocked, and then their support will be so far away. Like, you know, Russia trying to support Serbia is nearly impossible. It looks like this for me in the long run.